pray for me, take my pain for me, save my soul for me, 'cause I'm alone to see. If I'm gon' die for you, if I'm gon' kill for you, then I spill this blood for you.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back with another episode of Daze's Lost Legacy. I missed last week. I do apologize. The Black Panther hype was getting to me last week. I didn't want to do nothing. I just wanted to go see Black Panther. I was waiting all week. I was like, yo, if I just wait, I don't do anything, time's going to go by faster. Saw Black Panther. More on that in a separate video later on. But we're back with Daze's Lost Legacy. I told you guys I wanted to keep this consistent, and that's what I'm going to do. And I will have extra videos this week to make up for the lack of a video last week, so there will be a couple extra videos on the channel. I'm dead serious about keeping more consistent weekly content about video games and getting a little bit back into movies. Again, they'll be on the other videos in the channel. But this week on Daze's Lost Legacy, I definitely want to change it up a bit. I feel that the format that I was using is constantly used on every other gaming show. And the title of this podcast is Daze's Lost Legacy. So I'm going to focus it more on just what I think about specific things that I want to happen in the video game industry. Certain games I want to come back, certain games that I might want to get rid of. And that's what I'm going to focus on, because the best part of Daze's Lost Legacy to me is when I pitch something to the video game industry that I know they're not going to hear. That's why the segment was always called On Deaf Ears, and the podcast is called Daze's Lost Legacy, because one day if someone hears this down the road, they're going to realize that I had a good idea and that they never used it. So that's what Daze's Lost Legacy probably should be, and we're going to test it out in this episode to see if that one works, where I'll introduce you to a topic that bounces off of something that's happening in the current video game sphere, but it's going to bring up what should be done, and that's actually going to make the podcast a lot shorter. It's not even a real podcast. You can just call these videos, and I'm just labeling them Daze's Lost Legacy, whatever you want to do. It's not a real podcast. It's just kind of just videos that I make. So one thing I want to bring up is I'm pretty sure you've all heard that Burnout Paradise is getting a remaster, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. Now, Burnout was a mildly successful game. I wouldn't say they were breakout successes when you look at the sales charts on them. If they were breakout successes, they'd still be going to this very day. But Burnout Paradise, there's like a section of people that really love that game, and there's a section of people that love the other Burnout games, like Takedown. So Burnout Paradise being the one that gets remastered, that shows that EA chose this one with the possibility of more Burnouts getting that remaster treatment if Burnout Paradise sells well. But let's go back and remember that EA wasn't really trying to get into the whole remaster sphere. They said that was hearkening on the past and they was all about the future. That wasn't their exact words, but I'm pretty much quoting it in my way. That's pretty much what they said, and that I wouldn't say rubbed people the wrong way, but people was upset at the fact that, whoa, we're not going to get Mass Effect Trilogy remastered, we're not going to get Dead Space ever again, like, what's happening here? But as far as, now that Burnout Paradise is getting a remaster 100% confirmed, I believe without a shadow of a doubt that Mass Effect Trilogy will eventually come. I don't think it's going to be relatively soon. I think it's definitely going to be after Anthem, probably at least 6 months after Anthem. I think they want Anthem to have that room to breathe, see if it's going to be a success or not. And possibly with the failure of Anthem, they'll remaster Mass Effect, because they're going to need to bring in some dough some kind of way if Anthem is a failure. They're putting a lot on Anthem, as we know, that they shifted all the gears from BioWare into Anthem. This is the game you're going to work on. You're going to make it right. We want it out first quarter 2019. That's the latest you're going to get. So they're shifting all gears to that, and depending on the failure or success of Anthem determines what direction EA decides to go from here on out. EA is being hurt right now with what happened with Battlefront 2, with the whole loot box thing, people complaining about UFC 3, EA is on everyone's shit list. So, and they deserve it. I will not defend EA in this at all. What they did to my favorite franchise in Mass Effect was beyond atrocious with what happened with Andromeda, with what they did and the way they downgraded that franchise from a 9 out of 10 franchise to a fucking 6 or 7 out of 10. Like that's awful. You know, we're up here, Mass Effect's getting 9s constantly, and you drop it to where they're getting 6s and 5s and 7s. That's a whole nother topic. But I mainly want to get into what I believe should happen other than the Mass Effect trilogy remaster is a Dead Space remaster. Like, that has to happen, right? It has to happen because Dead Space was successful. Not just number 1, but number 2 as well. Number 3, they completely ruined themselves with number 3. And I am in the minority. Well, I might be in the minority, but it feels like it that I believe Dead Space 2 was better than Dead Space 1. The controls were smoother. There was more action in it, but not enough to take away from the scares. Though some people believe it took away from the scares. I don't believe that. They upped the action in it. The story got more deeper. It got better. We had a voice acted main character. Everything about Dead Space 2 just one upped the original Dead Space, and it even shows in the Metacritic score where Dead Space 2 is sitting at a 90, Dead Space 1 is sitting at an 89. Yeah, that's only 1 point. It could go either way with more thought on it if people re-reviewed the games, but I believe you do remaster the whole trilogy and not just Dead Space 1. Dead Space 1 would be the go-to if you just had to pick one because of people's love for that game. But since seeing as how Dead Space 2 not only sold more, but had the better critic scores, I don't see how you cannot remaster Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 1. I mean, and if you're going to remaster both of them, you might as well do the third, despite people not liking the third, despite it turning literally into like a shooter instead of a horror game. You would have to do all 3. Especially with your middle game, technically, if you're going by scores, if you're going by sales being your most successful game, you have to remaster that one as well. And I definitely would want that one remastered before even the first Dead Space. Like I said, I'm kind of in the minority on it, where I like Dead Space 2 better than Dead Space 1. Sure, Dead Space 1 was the thing that launched it off, but so was Mass Effect 1, and Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 are better than Mass Effect 1, so that argument is invalid. But if they can get that trilogy remastered, and let's say it hits in the way that Crash Bandicoot trilogy hit, I think that we could see Dead Space 4 or a total reboot. Maybe not call it Dead Space 4 because you don't want it involved with the original trilogy or whatnot. Or you could just call it Dead Space : Aftermath or Dead Space : whatever you want to call it. You know, like they did that animated movie. Just call it Dead Space : Revival. Don't actually call it Revival. Please don't call it Rebirth either. But if you want to go like God of War route, where that's like a reboot and a sequel at the same time, it's just called God of War, you can do the same thing with Dead Space. Just call it Dead Space. It's coming back. Make sure you stick to those horror roots. Do not go the shooter route. You know you messed up with Dead Space 3 very badly, but Dead Space 2 was a hit, guys. I mean, that's you can't deny that. The amount it sold, the critic scores it got, Dead Space 2 was a hit. I don't see a lot of people really crapping on Dead Space 2, but I have heard people say if you're going to remaster Dead Space, all you need to remaster is Dead Space 1. I don't agree at all. I feel you guys are not looking at the bigger picture here. I feel you guys are probably unaware of the success that Dead Space 2 was, and the fact that it technically did get slightly higher critic scores. Dead Space 2 has to get a remaster. It just has to get a remaster if Dead Space 1 is going to get a remaster. So you might as well do the whole trilogy. Why are you just going to do 2 out of 3? You might as well do all 3. You know, save yourself some money and do all 3. Just give it to whatever studio does all the remasters nowadays. Blue Note, whatever that studio is called. Give it to them. Say, hey, we want this remastered. They'll do it. They have no problem with it. They're like the king of remasters anyway. But it can lead to another Dead Space game, the same way that Crash Insane Trilogy is leading to more Crash games. The hype around that, well, Crash is a little bit older, it's been gone a lot longer, so maybe the hype wouldn't be as big as for Dead Space, but if you say that if you come out front and say that if it's successful, the remasters, you will make another one, I guarantee that's going to be a success day one. I guarantee if you are just upfront about it, that's going to be a success. Because Dead Space was very intriguing. It had an intriguing sci-fi horror story, man, and that's why I even got into it. I watched it originally. Back then I was too scared to play those kind of games, you know. That's why I loved it when Resident Evil kind of shifted, and with Resident Evil 5, I was a little scared back then. But I got into it by watching it. I watched the first game all the way through. Watch someone play the second game all the way through. In the second game, I'm telling you, when they dug that story even deeper, that was when I was completely sold on the franchise. Like, yep, this is money right here. This is money. This could be a movie, man. This could be next level sci-fi horror hit in the way of Alien, if they was to do it right. Key words right there. Do it right. Okay. So if we're going to remake this game or bring in a brand new one, a new sequel of Dead Space 4, I know that there's super high doubts about that because apparently EA had some super crazy sales expectations for Dead Space 3, and it's like, what? What? Do you expect this to sell like Battlefield and Call of Duty numbers? Like, is that what you really expect from Dead Space, which was originally a niche horror game that broke out into a pretty good success with Dead Space 2, but you expected buku numbers? What were you expecting? 7 to 8 million copies? Is that what you really thought that was going to sell? Come on, EA. Come on, EA. That wasn't going to happen. Now, expecting something like that from, I don't know, Mass Effect Andromeda, I could say that's reasonable. That's a crazy selling franchise. Not even just with the games, but with like the merchandising from it. You fucked up with Andromeda though. So that's what happens when you F up. You ruin your sales. Not saying you effed up with 2, but you effed up with 3, and people got word that you were effing up with 3 way before the game came out. Based on the trailers, everything they were seeing, it didn't look horror enough. It didn't look horror. I remember when that game came out like it was yesterday. And the day it dropped, the hype wasn't there. People was like, Dead Space 3 is out. But people knew that game wasn't horror enough. So all you got to do is stick to the roots of that, okay? Like, we even shifted gears, right, with BioShock. And they 2K remastered all of BioShock, despite BioShock 2 being relatively the same game as BioShock 1. And then we completely shift gears from horror to whatever you want to call it, fantasy in the sky, shoot them thousands of bullets flying in BioShock Infinite, and BioShock Infinite is arguably the best BioShock. So I don't want to hear that excuse that you shouldn't remaster all 3 because you shifted gears. If Dead Space 3 actually was still good in a way, then you would have been forgiven, but it wasn't that good. You turned a horror game into a pure shooter, and your story went south. That's what made it even worse. Your story started going south, man. Your story was intriguing, Dead Space 1 and 2. Your story went south. People didn't like that you changed the gameplay that much. So you couldn't have a BioShock Infinite type praise and resurgence. BioShock Infinite, when it shifted gears that way from horror shooter to pure shooter pretty much, it was celebrated extremely because that story was fantastic. The story was fantastic. The characters were fantastic. You fell in love with Elizabeth. Don't get me started. So, EA, listen to your fans. It seems like you're trying to listen at least. You're test running listening with bringing Burnout Paradise in. Listen to your fans and give us Dead Space. That's all. That's not the only thing they want from you. Of course, we want the Mass Effect trilogy, but I definitely see that coming. I don't even think I need to make a case for that. Like, I definitely see that down the road happening. Too many people are asking for it, especially after what you did to Andromeda. We don't need to discuss all of that. That's a separate episode of Daze Lost Legacy that we can go into if you really want me to break down what you have done to my favorite franchise in Mass Effect. But you can give us Dead Space before the Mass Effect trilogy, actually. I unfortunately probably only see them remastering the first one because of the outcry for the first one is greater than the second and definitely greater than the third. But I think you should just do the whole trilogy. Dead Space 2 sold more. Dead Space 2 has the greater critic score. Yeah, it's by one, whatever. But it still got the higher scores. And if you're going to take Remaster 2, you might as well remaster the third. What's the point of remastering 2 out of 3? It doesn't make any sense. That's like remastering Crash Bandicoot 1 and 2, but you didn't remaster Warped? It makes no damn sense. But anyway, that was Daze's Lost Legacy. The new format that I'm testing out. Just me talking about stuff that should happen in the gaming industry. You know, breaking down the news and all the stuff that's happening. Too many people do that. I'm not going to get in that field by myself in this way. Too many people do that. So I'm just going to throw at the gaming industry what they should do. And sometimes what they should not do. That's probably going to be next episode. I'm going to find something that they shouldn't do. No, a remake that they shouldn't make, or a game, that franchise that just needs to die. And that'll be next week's Daze Lost Legacy. So until then, guys, thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye.